CBGB's was one of the most legendary clubs in rock and roll, punk, and hardcore history. We already made one video about landmark shows there, but based on your comments, I guess we missed a few things. So using your comments as a guide, in this video we'll talk about 17 more artists and shows from CBGB's. If you ever went to a show at CBGB's or if your band played there, please tell your story in the comments. And if you dig this video, please click like and subscribe. It's a huge help. Bad Brains, December 24th, 25th, and 26th, 1982. Pioneering hardcore punk band Bad Brains played many legendary shows at CBGB's in the late 70s and early 80s. The band was named after the Ramones song Bad Brain. Frontman H.R. Hudson says their first CBGB shows were instrumental in sustaining and encouraging the band. He said it was showing us how, through group participation and staying together, we could make our dreams a reality. Some of their most famous performances at the venue were in 1982, particularly in the month of December. Christmas Eve 1982 kicked off a 3-day hardcore festival at CBGB's, which will be forever emblazoned in hardcore history. Luckily for us, the shows were captured on both video and audio. The show, video, and record Bad Brains live at CBGB's 1982 draws on performances from all 3 nights. There's a link in the description. It shows a particularly intense and energetic series of performances, with Bad Brains delivering a blistering set of songs that whip the crowd into a delirious frenzy. The boundary between the audience and the band is permeable. You can see punks slam dancing across the stage right behind HR, and the crowd surges forward during some of the most intense parts, threatening to engulf the stage and the band. After several hardcore tracks, Bad Brains easily and adeptly switched to dub or roots reggae styles. The band's incredible musicianship and raw energy are on full display, and the show has become a legendary moment in the history of punk and hardcore music for reasons that will become obvious to you when you watch the footage. The shows were also notable for the cultural climate that surrounded it. They took place during a period of intense violence and tension on the New York punk scene, as rival factions and gangs fought for control of the clubs and the streets. Despite the potential for conflict, the diverse, vibing crowd was united in their love of music and their respect for the band's unique talent and vision. Plasmatics, March 1st, 1979. Plasmatics were a punk rock and heavy metal band formed in New York City in the late 70s. They were known for their wild, controversial stage performances, smashing TV sets and other props with sledgehammers, chainsaws, and other power tools, as well as Wendy O. Williams' often outrageous and sexually provocative costumes and antics. The band's music is heavy and aggressive, blending elements of punk, metal, and other genres. The Plasmatics were also known for political activism, particularly around issues of censorship and free speech. Wendy O. Williams was a vocal opponent of censorship, and often spoke out against attempts to restrict artistic expression in music and other forms of media. In the Plasmatics' first CBGB's appearance, the band is led by Wendy O. Williams in a punk rock erotic art performance that can still be seen on YouTube in a video from Paul Schenkel's cutting-edge public access TV show, Inner Tube. This was a notable show for the band, as it was one of their earliest performances and it helped to establish them as a force to be reckoned with on the New York punk scene. The Dead Boys, August 22nd, 1977. The Dead Boys were a punk rock band that formed in Cleveland, Ohio in 1976. The band consisted of Stiv Bators on vocals, Cheetah Chrome and Jimmy Zero on guitars, Jeff Magnum on bass, and Johnny Blitz on drums. They were part of the first wave of punk rock. Joey Ramone met the Dead Boys at a Ramones show in Cleveland, and he encouraged them to move to New York. When they arrived, the Dead Boys quickly gained a reputation for their rowdy, confrontational live shows and their raw, aggressive sound. Naturally, they ended up at CBGB's with some regularity. The Dead Boys released their debut full-length album, Young, Loud, and Snotty, in 1977, which is still regarded as a classic of the punk genre. Throughout 1977, the band played powerful shows at CBGB's. Just look up Dead Boys at CBGB's on YouTube and start watching some of the shows. Specific dates are often not included. However, one famous and significant performance at the venue was likely their performance on August 22nd, 1977. It's become legendary among fans because it captured the raw energy and attitude of the early punk rock scene. Some songs from this show ended up on All This and More, a collection of live Dead Boys shows from 1977 and 1978. It was also released as part of the live collection Twistin' on the Devil's Fork, live at CBGB 77 and 78. The Dead Boys' performances on these recordings are an iconic representation of early punk rock. The band's raw energy and Stiv Bators' confrontational stage presence solidify their place on the punk rock pantheon.
The first time I ever went to CBGB's was also the first time the Dead Milkmen played at CBGB's, and it was in June of 1986. We did a mini tour, a weekend tour with a West Coast band called the Angry Samoans. They were the headliners. At least my first impression was that it was smaller than I imagined in my head. And then the stage is in the back as far as you go. The main area in front of the stage is where most people would gather and watch the band. It wasn't exceptional, that's for one thing. It was run-of-the-mill. The sound man acted like the typical sound man. Hurry up, do this, watch your time. You're not the headliner, get your stuff off as quickly as you can. No, the sound man was actually nice to us after we played, and he let us know that he recorded the set off the soundboard and gave us a copy of the tape, so we left with a souvenir of the show.
I heard legends about this guy. In fact, his son commented on the first video and said my dad was the sound guy and used to record shows for people.
Oh, well, I guess he just did that all the time. That was very nice of him. So as far as sound guys go, at least for this is in our early days, he would have been one of the nicer ones.
Do you have the tape still?
Yes, and that's how I actually know what date it was that we played. I mean, I put it up as a bootleg on my own page, and I also know that it gets traded. Somebody inadvertently turned a 6 into a 9, so now it's known as 1989, but it was really 1986. I know from the set list. I think the show was helpful for us because Angry Samoans were a well-known punk band. They rarely, at that point in time, came to the East Coast. They were a West Coast touring band, if anything. They had limited number of shows, and we were lucky enough to be the opening act. I was a fan of theirs also, so it was impactful just for that reason.
They Might Be Giants, October 18th, 1983. They Might Be Giants played at CBGB 18 times at least in the years before it closed. Their first headlining show was Tuesday, October 18th, 1983, with Agit Pop and the Black Tights opening. The band was relatively unknown at the time, I think, and still a few years from releasing their 1986 self-titled debut album. There's no record of the set list. Even the obsessive chroniclers of the band don't have it. What did they play? If that 1985 demo gives a hint, it shows a more raw sound, but also a clear vision and even a lot of the songs, which would grow into the delightfully quirky discography of the band. John Flansburgh talked briefly about CBGB's in a 2018 interview with Consequence. CBGB's was very much the official gatekeeper of the New York rock scene at the time. There'd be an audition night, and if you passed that, they'd give you a Monday or Tuesday show. And if you brought a lot of people in, then you'd get a Thursday or Friday or Saturday show. It took the better part of a year to get from audition night to a Thursday night, and if you didn't keep on playing, you'd get pushed back. Another TMBG at CBGB's fact: during the production of Lincoln, the Johns had gruff-voiced CBGB's owner Hilly Crystal record the vocals to the song You'll Miss Me, but ultimately they balked at releasing it with the Hilly vocal, and Flansburgh sang it instead. Joshua Freed, a longtime collaborator with They Might Be Giants, worked as sound man at CBGB's in the mid-1980s. It's possible he actually did sound at that first show. They Might Be Giants' last show at CBGB's was December 8th, 1993, and it was part of the club's 20th birthday celebration. Living Colour played tons of shows at CBGB's during their early years. The arguably most important one was their debut on July 19th, 1984. Early on, they were billed as Vernon Reid's Living Colour, which shows just how popular their British-born lead guitarist was. He was already well known on the New York jazz scene. Despite Vernon's popularity, Living Colour was still a relatively unknown band in 1984, but their high-energy performance and genre-bending sound quickly won them additional headlining gigs at CBGB's. They also caught the attention of the audience and the music press. They sounded different then, with their first shows delving heavily into funk, artful jazz improvisational, and unabashed punk shots. Also worth mentioning, they released a record of their Tuesday 12/19/89 show as part of the Live from CBGB series. And when Mick Jagger and his friend Jeff Beck went to see them at CBGB's in 1987, Mick's endorsement finally gave the band the boost they needed to get the major label record deal they deserved.
I played at CBGB's with Comateens, Dizzy and the Romalars, and a band called West Side Movers. I played a lot of times at CBGB's. It was like my home. Comateens was the first band, and Hilly called us, which was unusual. Hilly didn't call anybody. You really had to bug him to get a gig. We just dropped off the tape, and he called me. And by coincidence, a friend of mine was really hounding me to get an answering machine. And the very day that I got one, the first message was from Hilly, that he liked the Comateens tape and he wanted us to play there. And typically the first gigs at CBGB's were very late at night and on a weekday night. So it might have been like a Thursday at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'll never forget that because the club was mostly filled with Hell's Angels. We did not play the kind of music that they probably wanted to hear. And I decided to wear nothing but a leotard and tights, and they were white. So I was in a white leotard and tights in front of the Hell's Angels. Most of the songs were original songs, but one of the songs that we covered was My Girl. And that's when I realized there was something off about what was going on. I was so scared, and I said to myself, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm not going to play music anymore. This is it, this night. I was able to get through the set without hitting any wrong notes or making any mistakes. I got off stage, and even though our reception was very polite, not even from Hell's Angels, I was happy. And that's the history of why I stayed in music.
Suicidal Tendencies, August 13th, 1983. Suicidal Tendencies is a pioneering punk rock band that emerged in the early 80s in California. They're known for their aggressive style and socially conscious lyrics that often touched on themes of alienation, self-doubt, and frustration with society. The crossover thrash band released their self-titled debut in June of '83, including the iconic song Institutionalized. I got that album on cassette in 1986, and I played the tape over and over again, sipping an ice-cold Pepsi. ST were known for their high energy and intensity at live shows. Their aggressive style was perfectly suited to the raw, gritty atmosphere of CBGB's. The first Suicidal Tendencies show at CBGB's took place on August 13th, 1983. They just started touring nationally, and this was the band's first show in New York City, and it was a huge success. It was a hardcore matinee packed with fans eager to see the show, and Suicidal Tendencies did not disappoint. One of our ballers posted a really fascinating story about Suicidal Tendencies getting their bus vandalized by punks at CBGB's in 1984. As compelling as that story is, I think it might have happened somewhere else. I couldn't find a record of Suicidal Tendencies tour bus being vandalized at CBGB's, but there were news reports about it happening in Philadelphia. But if you were there and you saw it, please set the record straight and comment below. Cro Mags are a hardcore punk and crossover thrash band from New York City known for their aggressive and hard-hitting music, as well as their role in shaping the sound and style of New York hardcore in the 1980s. They're also unique because they have a Hare Krishna background. The band has gone through many incarnations and lineup changes since the beginning. One of their most notable appearances at CBGB's was on May 15th, 1997. The newly reformed band headlined an emotional benefit concert for the family of Rabies, the late frontman of New York hardcore band Warzone. Cro Mags played an amazing set. The show also featured performances by Agnostic Front, H2O, and Murphy's Law. Sonic Youth and Dinosaur with Gone and Big Stick, June 13th, 1986. The band we now know as Dinosaur Jr. used to be called Dinosaur. The guys from Dinosaur were really big fans of Sonic Youth. So when Kim Gordon and Thurston Moore and Lee Ronaldo came up to them after a show they did at Folk City, declaring themselves fans, it was just too much. Dinosaur was floored. Even more so when they were invited to support Sonic Youth on a September 1986 tour of Midwest colleges and clubs. In advance of that tour, Dinosaur joined Sonic Youth for this historic show at CBGB.
As far as the other bands go, I do not think I saw Gone because I was not really a big fan of Greg Ginn's instrumental material. I did see Dinosaur Jr., who at the time were still just called Dinosaur, but I didn't know their material at all. I didn't get into them until a couple of years after that, so I can't really speak much on what they were like other than I enjoyed the show. The opening act was a duo from Queens, New York called Big Stick, who I was friendly with. They were kind of this avant-garde industrial novelty band in a way, but their music was really fun with a lot of samples. Sonic Youth is the band I remember the most from that night, and it was kind of a revelation for me. They had just released Evil, and that was the tour at the time, and most of the set was from that album, and I had not heard a lot of it before, and I think it blew me away because they had injected a lot of melody into the noise. I was up in the front row taking pictures, and I just remember thinking, wow, this band is really good. I really like them now. I'm a fan. They ended the set with Expressway to Your Skull, and they did a very long, extended, hypnotic version, and everybody in the club was blown away. It was so intense and so mesmerizing. I think I was a big fan from that day forward.
Jayne County. Jayne County is an American singer and record producer. Her career has spanned 6 decades. Originally known as Wayne, County sang for the influential proto-punk band Wayne County and the Electric Chairs. The band became known for campy, foul-mouthed ballads and glammy punk songs. County was known for her outrageous stage antics and unique singing voice. She went on to become rock's first openly transgender singer, adopting the stage name Jayne County. She was a regular at the Stonewall Inn and took part in the historic riots there. She was also a regular at Andy Warhol's factory and collaborated briefly with Bowie during the 70s. Wayne County and the Electric Chairs were supported by the Police during their 1977 tour of Holland. The Electric Chairs later recruited the Police's first guitarist, Henry Padovani, on rhythm guitar. Wayne County and the Backstreet Boys played regularly at CBGB and Max's Kansas City, where County was also a DJ. In a comment on our first CBGB video, one of our videos placed Jayne at CBGB's, spinning the 45 of the then unheard Anarchy for the UK for a rapt crowd in a historic moment in late 1976. As she was a DJ at Max's Kansas City, it seems more likely it happened at Max's. Regardless, Jayne County was a key member of the CBGB's community and represented a growing acceptance of trans figures in creative spaces. Reagan Youth, June 25, 1983. A band called Puss was founded in 1980 by singer Dave Insurgent and guitarist Paul Cripple. Dave and Paul attended New York's Forest Hills High School, the same high school the Ramones went to. They changed the band to Reagan Youth shortly before playing their first gig on August 22, 1980. The band were hardcore leftists and anti-racists, with the name lampooning young Republicans and the imagery and lyrics sarcastically attacking the KKK, neo-Nazis, and right-wingers. Some of the images were so over the top that neo-Nazis and skinheads missed the joke, with one sad sack showing up at a show in full Nazi regalia and being openly mocked from the stage by Dave Insurgent. After graduation and the release of their first record, the 7-song Youth Anthems for the New Order EP, the band was a cornerstone of the Sunday afternoon hardcore matinees at CBGB, playing frequently with bands like Agnostic Front and Cro Mags. Hence their well-loved hit, It's a Beautiful Day for a Matinee. One of the most notable Reagan Youth shows was the Saturday, November 20th, 1982 show with Beastie Boys and Young and the Useless. The entire show with all 3 bands was recorded from the soundboard, and apparently it was all available at one point from Rat Cage Records. After many shows, many band member changes, and many records sold, Reagan Youth broke up in 1989 when Reagan left office.
Back in the day, I would record a lot of the shows. That show I actually filmed, and you can watch it on YouTube. That was the second time I saw Suicidal. They had been kind of inactive for a while. In 1986, they started doing shows again. My friend's band Ritual Tension opened up. They were great, in the same kind of milieu as Sonic Youth and Live Skull and all those Swans. I remember Suicide went on really late. They were incredible. They came out, and there's their appearance. Marty Rev had on this spangled black outfit and giant bug-eyed sunglasses. He just was like this strange wizard on doing these hypnotic rhythms repeating over and over and over again into your brain. Alan Vega was strange. He had his kind of wild hairdo, and you couldn't tell, like, on some sort of drugs. Was he totally amped on his own energy? But he just came out and he was so riveting, and I think the audience, I enjoyed watching the audience almost as much as the band, because it was a very interesting and colorful assemblage of people at that show. And the way they responded to the music was pretty interesting. Some people just got really tranced out and responded in unusual ways. It was a fun show. The ending of the show was a long version of Rocket USA that just felt like it went on and on forever, and it was just pulsating through your body.
Butthole Surfers, February 12th, 1986. On February 12th, 86, the Butthole Surfers played a memorable show at CBGB's. Around this time, the band was morphing from a more traditional punk band into a psychedelic freak-out experience. They had just released their Cream Corn EP about a month prior, and that saw them experimenting with blues, industrial music, psychedelic rock, and country in the space of 4 songs. This showcased a future direction for a band that would continue to evolve musically. There's a link to the full show audio in the comments, courtesy of the Mackenzie tapes. The Replacements played many notable shows at CBGB's. One of their most famous and infamous performances took place on January 18th, 1986. It was right before the Saturday Night Live performance that got them banned from ever returning to the show. The Mats had a reputation for a hard partying lifestyle and unpredictable live performances, but this show took things to a whole new level. The whole band was wasted throughout the show. They frequently stopped to engage in drunken banter and antics. It was a preview of the performance we'd all see on live TV later that night, and that got them kicked off NBC. On October 10th, 1987, gravelly crooner Paul Westerberg fell off CBGB's stage and injured himself during a replacement set. Despite the injury, Westerberg continued to sing and play the show while lying on his back. The incident has become a legendary moment in the band's history.
I don't really have the words to explain what CBGB is asking you to play the last ska show, and there's this marquee of all the last shows, and it's probably the best billing flyer or ad Big D's easily ever been a part of. We played with the Pie Tasters and Lost City Angels, the Specs, and Tri-State Conspiracy. It was a great show. I mean, any show with Pie Tasters is awesome, and any show at CBGB's is awesome, and so that was just a great show to be a part of. We had to go to my favorite part of the club, which is the throne toilet, which is a toilet that's kind of on a Game of Thrones kind of stage. It's the only toilet in the men's room, and there's no walls. And so if you did have to do your business, it's almost like a second stage to the main stage of CBGB's. It would be kind of, you're putting on your own show in a smaller venue inside of CBGB's. The shows are always so great at CBGB's because the way the stage is, people are like, right there at you. It's a conversation. You're pretty much playing like almost open mic night. People just go to CBGB's not even knowing the band, but going for the culture and going to get turned on to something new. You never fully knew who was in charge of CBGB's because everyone in the club was in charge of CBGB's, if you know what I mean. Whenever Big D would play CBGB's, I would always do the same thing. I would always kind of show up, unload the gear, go to a record store that was around the block, and I'd always buy one record, just judging it by its cover. We'd go get like a Jamaican Pie, and then go to a thrift store that was on the left side across the street from the record store and buy sweatshirts that I still wear today. And so when CBGB's finally closed, it's not even just the club, it's the whole area. There was a culture, there was a beat, there was a pulse, there was a heartbeat. You're just missing the whole human experience, the whole culture of that New York little spot, little block, and all the great vendors around it. And it was just blossoming. It was just a musical garden, an artist's garden around there.
If you dug this video, check out this one right here. It's about how much the artists got paid at Woodstock. It's kind of interesting.